What's up, everybody? You are about to be treated to a great episode of Gojo and Golic. Here's what we have on the menu for today. T. Higgins officially been given the franchise tag for the second year in a row. We will break that down for you. Plus, are the Titans going to trade the #1 pick? Apparently, they're not quite ready to entertain offers, but that could change. And we have some great guests. We got Dane Brugler, Jason Fitz, of course, going to be joining the program. It's going to be great. 2 hours starting right now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield with you guys this morning. Great show coming up, as always. Download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and watch us here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Subscribe and hit the bell over at the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel. As Jesse mentioned, Jason Fitz back in the saddle with us at 9 o'clock Eastern today. Plenty of great stuff to talk about with Fitz. College football on the cusp of some very world-altering news out of the ACC. We'll explain why this is the first bit of string that pulls us towards the college football apocalypse in a few years. And Dane Brugler going to join us, the Beast. If you have not and are not familiar with his draft guide, you probably don't consume much NFL draft content because it is the holy Bible. It is one of the best draft guides known to mankind. It is exhaustive. And this man, I saw firsthand working overtime in Indianapolis to make sure he gives you a banger. So we'll put a bow on the combine, the true risers and fallers and names you need to know heading into the spring that are going to be coming into the NFL. Dad, as far as the guys that are already here in the NFL, it's tag day. I appreciated T. Higgins' jest announcing his franchise tag with the Cincinnati Bengals with the simple 3-letter word online. But teams have till 4 o'clock Eastern today to hand out the franchise tag to the players that they may franchise. And that can be for the 1-year contract. As we know, that's the average of the top 5 salaries at the position. But it also gives those teams the ability to work on a long-term deal until July 15th. So sort of a placeholder for a lot of people. And right now we have Trey Smith, the offensive guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, currently on the franchise tag. T. Higgins, who we will get to momentarily, has the franchise tag placed on him for the second straight year by the Cincinnati Bengals. And then, Dad, the name that won't be franchise tagged today, as we heard last night, reports from Ian Rappaport and others, Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings, not expected to be franchise tagged there, while they're still working on some sort of deal that could potentially bring him back to Minnesota. They're not going to give themselves that wiggle room as Sam Darnold is set to become a free agent.
Yeah, and that would cost them, the Sam Darnold tag would be a little over $40 million. The Trey Smith tag would be $23.4 million as we start to individually start to look at them, who was tagged, who wasn't. Again, only 2 tagged so far. Again, for those who are not familiar with the history of the franchise tag, this was something that the players, were looking for when it was first negotiated in the CBA. Because it was the average of the franchise tag was the average of the top 5 players of what they were making in the league, and that's what a player would be guaranteed for a year. And players were cool with that. They were like, okay, I'm a top 5. I'm getting the average of the top 5 players. I'm one of the highest paid players at my position. And then over time, they realized, well, okay, this is stopping me from getting more guaranteed money because it's just a 1-year stopgap. And it gives really the team all the leverage. While it pays me top 5 money of that position, it's only for a year and takes away the ability of signing a 3, 4, 5, 6-year deal with way more guaranteed money on my plate, considering it's the sport where you get injured the most and could miss time. But if you have that guaranteed money, you're in a good spot. So now players hate it. Players want to get rid of it. Players want it gone, and teams love having it.
Yeah, it's one of the worst things financially to ever happen to NFL players, like truly. And as fans, it sucks. Like, I guess as fans, it's great because it allows you to retain your star player. And I know for fans, that's the majority of what people are looking at. But I guess as fans of the sport and people that want to see the ball advanced and big trades and player movement, this does inhibit a lot of that. It prevents us from seeing guys hit the open market like T. Higgins. The Sam Darnold thing, Dad, not as surprising to me, right? We knew this is a team in a bit of a different situation because of J.J. McCarthy being drafted there. Is there any part of you that still thinks that this signals one way or another the future for Sam Darnold, that he is either going to get a smaller deal done, or does this signal to you they're pretty comfortable letting him go if that's the way this ends up going?
I think they're pretty comfortable letting him go, even if they pick up another quarterback at a cheaper rate to bridge. I think they're willing to let him go and start the J.J. McCarthy area, or as I said, another veteran, lesser named veteran, to kind of bridge it until J.J. is fully ready to go. But yeah, I think they're ready to move on from that. Sam is going to hit a bit of a payday, not a monster payday, not a top 5 payday of quarterbacks, the top quarterbacks, but he earned himself a whole lot of money in the quarterback world, which can be an overvalued world, we know. But hey, he's in it, and he had himself a hell of a year, save for the last couple of games. So he's going to make out from that. I do think Minnesota is going to be ready to move on from him.
The franchise tag for a quarterback would have been just over $40 million fully guaranteed for the 1 year. And for the Minnesota Vikings, listen, you're in a place where, because of your quarterback being on a rookie contract, you've got room to work. Like, the Vikings have the 5th most effective cap space going into this season. And while maybe you don't want all of that planted in your quarterback room, it is unprecedented. I think I saw, I'll pull this up from Dan Orlovsky, but I'm pretty sure I saw our buddy Paul Hembekides over at ESPN had a stat about Sam Darnold and what he represents, that no quarterback has ever thrown as many touchdowns as Sam Darnold did, 35 in a season, and not been back with the same team the following season.
Listen, I mean, there is a path that can see Minnesota keeping him under the tag, because the one thing you're not going to see, it's a very rare occasion when a guy gets tagged, he doesn't want to get tagged, says he's not going to play for the tag. Remember, if you get tagged and the tag can go out by today, and then the deadline for anybody out there who doesn't know is July 15th. You have to get a long-term deal done by July 15th. If a deal is not done by July 15th, you have to play for that tag number. So you would be in Sam Darnold's case, he would be locked in to a 1-year, $40 million deal, which doesn't suck, but he could get more on the open market. We know that. But that's what he would be locked into. And on a very rare occasion, will a player say, I'm not playing on the tag, and sit for the year? Let's be honest. Sam Darnold, and I would say this about most players, are not sitting for the year. Sam Darnold is not sitting for the year. He's coming off of a really good year. He would be making $40 million. He is not going to play.
But yeah, I mean, but they're not going to tag him. So that's a non-issue. None of that matters. And so I guess that's my point, is what does this signal by them saying no? Because it seems like a move they could afford if they really wanted to say. And this, to me, Dad, is where it might be indicative of what J.J. McCarthy is doing behind the scenes. And the reports from Kevin O'Connell and everybody have been, J.J. McCarthy is progressing nicely through his rehab. That, to me, would be the only thing that might force your hand in terms of saying, hey, we're going to go out here, slap a big, which, I mean, God, relative to the starting quarterback market, $40 million does not feel like all that much, considering I think there's 9 guys making $50+ million a year. So that would be a relative pittance for the level of production you're used to and continuity of that position if you don't think JJ's ready.
So what's a deal we think Sam may get that you could still live with it in Minnesota, because you have a rookie quarterback or a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal? So it's something we'll be discussing with Cleveland, with what they're playing Deshaun Watson, and if they draft themselves a quarterback, is the fact that I think Sam Darnold is in the 4-year 160 area. But I think his number will be basically what the tag number is, but for a number of years. 4 years for 160, 100 maybe guaranteed, or a little over 100 guaranteed. I think that's where he's going to live. So the question would be for Minnesota, can you afford something like that because your other quarterback is on a rookie deal? I don't think they want to. Quite honestly, I don't think they want to. And if that's a deal that he can get from somebody, I think if Minnesota were to re-sign him, they'd like to re-sign Sam at like a 2-year deal, 3-year at the most, but probably a 2-year deal, which isn't going to happen. If they're not going to tag him, like they're not going to, he's going to get a better offer somewhere else. So I think they're going to be comfortable moving on from him.
Yeah, if you're Sam Darnold, the chances of you having equally as good of a season, being this young still, and walking into a quarterback offseason with this much need and this little inventory, the circumstances there are hardly ever going to be better, probably for you again in your career. And knowing there's a shelf life on this seems like the right spot for him to depart. Minnesota, again, for whatever their reasons are, maybe it's just confidence in Kevin O'Connell, right? J.J. McCarthy progressing nicely, and you've got a play caller that you believe is the kingmaker. We said going into last season, if anyone was in position to go and make the best out of Sam Darnold, it was going to be KOC. He delivered on that, and now they get to have this debate where he will not be franchise tagged, and they will keep it moving here at quarterback in Minnesota. Dad, the one that becomes interesting is T. Higgins and the Cincinnati Bengals, who they will franchise tag as they try and get a long-term deal done. And everyone in Cincinnati's been clear on the messaging, from Joe Burrow to management. They want to bring everybody back, and that includes Jamar Chase, who they've come out and said they're going to make the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, Trey Hendrickson, who's had 17.5 sacks each of the last 2 seasons, and T. Higgins, who, when he's been healthy and when he's been on the field, has been a number 1 caliber receiver in so many ways for this team. So, Dad, now that the franchise tag is here, this seems like a declaration of their intentions to try and get something done, and it really seems like Cincinnati, maybe the order of operations, I think this is there to give them time because Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson seem to be the priority amongst the 3, but it seems no doubt an indication they want to get this done with T. Higgins, and they believe they can.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the top in both those categories. First, before you even get to T. Higgins, of they say they want to take care of everybody financially. Jamar Chase is easy. I heard Mina Kimes talking about it, but I mean, what she said, everybody is saying. You take the top amount, Justin Jefferson, you throw some money over the top, and you get the deal done. You have to have the foresight to know that's what the deal's going to be. I know it's not as easy as that, but quite honestly, it's as easy as that. You know basically where the number is going to be. So you have to have that in your mind. And then as far as edge rusher, the top edge rusher is Nick Bosa, I think at $34 million a year. I don't know if Trey Hendrickson will make that, but Trey Hendrickson has earned, 17.5 sacks the last 2 years on a depleted defense where he's been the only threat. He's earned himself $30 million a year, don't you think? I mean, he's earned himself that, or right in that area, $28, $30 million a year that he should get. So you know where Jamar is. Jamar's going to be $38, probably $40 million a year that you have to take care of. So where does T. Higgins fit in? We know T. Higgins got 21 mil last year, 21.8. It would be 26.1. So quite honestly, he's doing the wide receiver version of Kirk Cousins when Kirk Cousins played 2 years in a row remember when he played 2 years in a row on the tag and made himself a ton of money? I mean, basically T. Higgins, if he played on the tag this year, in the last 2 years would have been guaranteed $47 million. So a little under $25 million a year, which probably would be his, if he signed a longer contract, would probably be his number, right? 25, 26 mil a year. So, I mean, he's a guy who's been phenomenal. He was 6th in the league with 10 touchdowns, but he's only played 12 games the last 2 years. He's been a little injury prone. He's missed a handful of games the last 2 years. So, I mean, the numbers are there. They know what the numbers are, and they should have known what the numbers are. So it's just a matter of what can you fit in with the salary cap, and especially with other needs that you have as well, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
It's going to be interesting. Paying two receivers and two top flight receivers isn't a foreign concept. You look in the last couple of years, the Dolphins and the Eagles have both done this now to varying levels of success. Certainly, Miami, the difficulty has been Tyreek Hill's health, the rest of the offense functioning around those guys' availability. But for the Eagles, having those two guys around seems to have worked out pretty damn well. Yep. And the biggest difference in all of this, though, is, Dad, I'll give you the four numbers that matter the most: 31, 27, 28, 27. That's the age of all the guys that I just mentioned. Jamar Chase is 25 and T. Higgins is 26 years old. That's insane that you could lock these two guys up and that you've already had them as a part of this productive offense for that long. And so when you look at these guys, A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill are the only two in that equation making over $30 million a year. Now, Jalen Waddle got more guaranteed money in his deal than Tyreek Hill did. Right. But Tyreek Hill gets the average that everyone gets to point to as the shiny object here. Listen, for Jamar Chase, like you said, it's easy. Whatever Justin Jefferson's making, he's about to make more than that. How much more seems to be the hang-up. They said that they're still far apart right now, the Bengals and Jamar Chase, which, to your point, I can understand, hey, the devil's in the details, and maybe there's certain things about how this is structured that come up. But if you've got everyone in your organization coming out and saying, we are going to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, I don't understand how you can be far apart on that, but I digress. Yes. He's going to get his and be in that category. Dad, the other part of this is, with the cap jumping up as much as it has in the last couple of years, is there a chance that T. Higgins and his camp could say, listen, I am worth around $30 million a year, considering I'm younger than everyone that we just mentioned, and I'm someone that has been around here, and when Jamar Chase has been unavailable, I've been the one hanging on with you. There's a bunch of stats that point to this guy's production being right on par with that in this Bengals offense.
Listen, one thing, you can ask for whatever you want, and does he have a right to ask for it? Sure. But I think the thing that hurts him the most is missing 10 games in the last 2 years, is not being available for some of those games and playing 12 games each year the last 2 years. That could obviously be part of the negotiation. But we're talking about a couple of million difference, right? Is he going to get 27 million a year? Is he going to get 30 million a year? I mean, that's what we're talking about. But again, just like Jamar Chase, where you know the range of T. Higgins. That's the thing. You know the range of Trey Hendrickson, you know the range of T. Higgins, and you know the range of Jamar Chase. It's just a matter of negotiating the best number that you can. We always say the best negotiation, both sides aren't the happiest, right? Because they've given up a bit. Is one side always wants to have the leverage, and the leverage of the NFL to T. Higgins is, hey, we can tag you, and you're still with us for a year. And the leverage for Jamar Chase is saying, I won't provide my services. Because remember, Jamar Chase is under contract for one more year. Trey Hendrickson is under contract for one more year. And the only option the player has is to hold out, is to withhold their services. But Cincinnati, the bottom line is, Cincinnati says they want to pay these guys, and we all know the numbers, or right around the numbers, that these guys should be paid. This shouldn't be some wide berth of, oh my God, I can't believe they're there when we're here. Their play has shown exactly where their market value, or close to it, should be. So it should be just a matter of fine-tuning how you present the money and how it can work best for the team and best for the player.
Again, this is the crime of the franchise tag, is we should be watching T. Higgins hit the open market right now. And we should be watching the Patriots, the Commanders, the Chargers, all these teams bid handsomely for the services of a wide receiver that could have changed the landscape of the offseason. Imagine pairing him with Drake May going into next year and thinking about what we can do. And instead, now it's still exciting to ideate about what the Cincinnati offense is going to do opposite a defense that still needs to show up, because the Eagles, as an example, are prescient. You can pay these guys, but what it requires is you to go hit on Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, all these players in the draft that so far the Cincinnati Bengals have shown us they're not capable of replicating with their draft misses in recent memory there. To get more on the draft right, we're going to bring in an expert, Dane Brugler from The Athletic, going to join us here on Gojo and Golic. Free agency, the draft, it's all coming to a head this spring. And just coming back from Indianapolis and the scouting combine, no better way to put a bow on that part of this process and try and springboard into the rest of the run up until the draft and then visit with our next guest, Dane Brugler. You guys can check him out, NFL draft analyst over at The Athletic. The Beast is the holy Bible of getting ready for the NFL draft, and this man is exhaustingly working to bring you the best possible product there. Dane, good morning, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Good morning. It's an honor to be on with you guys.
I'm always glad.
No,
I'm always glad when we have somebody who is way younger than me and wasn't around that could tell me what my eval was coming out of Notre Dame back in '85. So I know you weren't around then. So to worry about what my number was.
Was there a combine in '85?
Actually, it was the first combine in one place before it got to Indy. All the combines before that were regional combines.
Okay.
85, my combine year, was at Arizona State, and it was the first one that was countrywide. The next year it was in New Orleans, and then in 87 it started its life in Indy. So yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's
So Dane, just imagine everything we see in Indy in Arizona State now. Dear God, help us all.
Something tells me it's changed a little bit over the years with the interest, the amount of people that go to it. This was my 15th combine, and just from 2011 until now, it's outrageous the amount of interest, the people. It's still a work trip. There's still so much you have to get done. But it's definitely the most productive week of the year for me, just because there's so much information coming at you. The tough part is taking all that information and figuring out how to apply it to this draft. And so that's kind of as we leave Indy, that's what we're left with, trying to sift through all the details that are out there.
And I guess to that end, Dane, we always have the question on the show about the utility of the combine. What are the important things that you look for to take away from an event that has very little actual football taking place in it? So for you, what are the things you're really focused in on that you believe you can pull the most value from this last weekend?
Well, yeah, first and foremost, the combine is for medicals and interviews. That's why the combine was really conceived. So, prospects like Mike Golic in 1985 didn't have to go to 30 different cities to get medicals and all that. They want everyone to come to one central location, and that way it just makes it easier on teams, on the players. And so getting all that medical information is huge. From the on-field standpoint, all the work's done at this point. You've watched all the tape. We have an idea of who these players are. If you haven't seen any of these players at the combine, you're kind of behind. So this is one big cross-checking exercise. You know, it's a chance to, okay, this guy was a good athlete on film. Does that match up with the 40 time, with the gauntlet drill, all these different drills that they put these prospects through? If something doesn't match up, if someone doesn't test as well, or maybe he tests better than what he put on film, okay, well, then we have to go back and figure out, okay, what did we miss? Because, you know, it's just another data point, and you want all these data points to line up with your final evaluation. And so the combine is definitely a big step in that process.
That's music to my ears, hearing it that way, basing it off of the tape that you've watched or seen a player play. As far as what you hear from teams, we all call this the lying season. What is there anything you can take from teams that are giving out information of what you can believe and not believe?
I mean, I think I've been doing this long enough where I know the people that are, you know, like the scouts that are my buddies and they're my friends, and I know like what they say is truth. And sometimes you hear some stuff, and that's part of the process of the excess of the combine, is kind of weeding through all that information. What is smoke? What doesn't sound like it's real? And we have to remember too, like, you know, this is the combine's like the first time the coaches really get involved. And so that this is a chance for them, like, to make a first impression, especially with these quarterbacks. So, you know, the scout can go through the fall, not like a player, but then the offensive coordinator, the play caller, the head coach, they meet with the quarterback at the combine, really like him, and all of a sudden that quarterback jumps to the top of their draft board. So things will change as the coaches get involved, and you know that's definitely a big step in the process. But yeah, you take everything you hear with a grain of salt. You know, the scouts, I have so much respect for the area scouts and national scouts who are putting in all the work. But you know, they're kind of they're at a disadvantage, because at the end of the day, they're not the ones making the picks. It's the GM, it's the coaches, and so they might love a player, but that player doesn't get enough bump on the board, on the stack. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting information outlet where you have to weed through what sounds real and what might be a little more smoke.
Let's get into some of the players. You mentioned quarterbacks, and we know this is a polarizing class. How did this group of quarterbacks acquit themselves, both the ones like Shedeur and Cam Ward that didn't throw, and then the ones that we saw on the field?
Yeah, it's disappointing we didn't get a chance to see Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. You know, I think, you know, Cam Ward is, since November, he has been the clear favorite to be that first quarterback drafted. And so, you know, if I'm Shedeur, I'm not a lock top 10 pick. So I'm going to do whatever I can to help myself. And that means throwing at the combine. He chose not to. And it's not like that's going to hurt him, but could it be a missed opportunity? Sure, it might be. You know, I think the feedback from the interviews has definitely been mixed with Shedeur. And the best way I can describe it is he's not a bad guy. He's not a good guy. It's not about that. It's a he's not for everyone guy. And that's something that if you spend more than 15 seconds around him, I think you understand that. You know, his personality, he's very bold, he's very confident, and that won't be for everybody with what they're looking for at the quarterback position. So, you know, like I said, the feedback was mixed. On the field, I thought a couple of the quarterbacks looked really performed well. Tyler Shuck from Louisville, the ball just explodes off his hand. And when you're built like that, you have size, you have some mobility, he runs well. And then you have the arm strength where the ball just explodes. Teams are going to be interested. And yes, he's 25, injury past. That is a problem. But I think when teams really boil it down and say, okay, well, we're talking about a day 2 pick, a guy like Tyler Shuck, that makes some sense. Jackson Dart's really interesting because he has some fans that think, yeah, you know what? First round, maybe second round. This is the Bo Nix bump, okay, with Jackson Dart. Teams looking for that next Bo Nix, who I don't think a lot of people saw him going top 15, but he ends up going early, leads his team to the playoff. He's in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. So, you know, copycat league, teams are saying, who's that next Bo Nix? Teams are looking at Jackson Dart as being maybe that guy. Good size, good athlete, has some tools. But coming from that Ole Miss offense, it's going to be, I think, a much bigger jump for him going to the NFL. But like you said at the top, it's a polarizing quarterback group. I think we're much closer to the Kenny Pickett year, where we saw one quarterback go in the top 73, than we are to last year, where we had 6 in the top 12. And that's going to make a guy like Shedeur Sanders extremely just a wild card on draft night. I could see him going top 6. I wouldn't be surprised if he fell to the second round. None of those two outcomes would be surprising. We could see a team like in the late or in the second round trade up in the late first to get him, kind of like a Teddy Bridgewater situation. So there's a lot of options on the table for where Shedeur Sanders is going to be drafted.
You said earlier that you use the on-field portion of the combine as data points to base off of, okay, I know what they've done on film, and does this match it, or do I need to go back and look? Who are a couple of players where you're going back and looking both positively and negatively because of what happened on the field at the combine back at their tape?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it gives you an immediate frame of reference because you're seeing one guy after the other. So immediately you can reset your eyes and compare apples to apples, which is really a great way to do this. Nick Emenwari from South Carolina, he's already in that first round conversation. But to see a guy 6'3" and an eighth, 220 pounds, go out there and run a 4.40, 43-inch vert, 11.6 broad, and to see him move in space was really, really impressive. And you see that on film, but not quite to that level. And so going back and making sure we get Nick Emenwari right will be something that I know I'll be focusing on this week. And I talked to his tight end at South Carolina, Joshua Simon, who is at the combine, and I just asked him in practice, what's it like going up against a guy like that with those physical tools? And he said, yeah, he's big and he's fast, but it's the way he reads things. It's the processing that really makes him a challenge to go up against. So Nick Emenwari, it looks like Tarzan, plays like Tarzan. And, I think that showed at the combine. I think about it like a Derwin James, but more athletic and even a little bit bigger. Armand Membu from Missouri, the offensive tackle, who he was late to my radar because he's a junior, wasn't sure he was going to come out. So I didn't watch him until maybe November, and I sat down, watched his tape. Next thing I know, I'm on his 8th tape because I'm just going. It's awesome to watch him. The body control is fantastic. He unfortunately missed the Senior Bowl, so a little bit of unknown with this 20-year-old talent, goes to the combine and just tears it up. At 332 pounds, to go out there and run a 4.91, we've never seen a guy 6'4", over 330 pounds, run a 4.91 on the offensive line in the last 25 years. So he went out there and did some special stuff, and it shows on the tape, and that's why Armand Membu, I think people are catching up. He is in the mix to be the first offensive lineman drafted. On the flip side, Tyler Booker from Alabama. You don't watch his film and necessarily say, oh, phenomenal athlete. That's not really his strength to his game and what makes him productive. But I was surprised how, low his vertical was. And, he didn't have the best testing, which, I think I expected more average than below average. But his positional work, the way he moved in the drills, I thought were a lot more smooth and cleaner. Malachi Starks, the talented safety from Georgia, who I think you watch him on film and you say, okay, that's a really good athlete. But, his 3-cone time was the worst among all the safeties. Short shuttle, the worst among all the safeties. And so I think going back and figuring out Malachi Starks a little bit more is going to be something a lot of teams are going to work on, because the tape says, hey, this guy could go in the first round, but the drills, the testing weren't as flattering in terms of showing his athleticism.
About a minute and a half left here. Among the positions, we always say this is the best position group in the class. Is it consensus D-line? Can this running back class push that group based on what we saw this weekend? Where are you at with that?
I think if we're talking like the top 100, I think we're going to say defensive line. It's the strength. If we're going to say the top 5 rounds or in the entire draft, I think it's fair to say the running backs, because every single round we're going to have 3, 4, 5 running backs come off the board. Wouldn't be surprised if we have some teams double dipping and getting a couple running backs from this class. And, and especially when we have in the 4th, 5th round, you've got guys with 3rd round grades still available just because there's only so many teams that are looking to draft a running back. So early, I'd say defensive line, both defensive tackle and on the edge. But throughout the entire draft, running back is loaded, and there's something for everybody. If you want a power back, if you want a scat back, you want a guy that's going to help you out on third downs, a lot of different variety in this running back class.
Going to be a really interesting group and a really exciting draft because we're not just focused on the quarterbacks, other positions being given a chance to shine. And as you pointed out, many stepping up to the plate on that. Check him out at DP Brugler on social media. Again, read him over at The Athletic. His top 100's up right now. The Beast is on the way this spring, and an exciting NFL draft season still ahead of us. Dane, really appreciate you giving us some time coming off the combine, man. Thanks so much.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dane.
And Dad, at that point, especially at the end, you looked and all across the board this last weekend, watching some of these D linemen compete, it popped. There's tons of first-round talent. We know that's a position that's one of the premium ones, especially on the edge in the NFL. But man alive, watching these running backs go and all run sub 4.5 and look as good as they did. This is, again, we talked about the problem of surplus at that position that creates the payday issues later on.
Exactly right. As we know, we'll probably have 2 in the first round with Genty and Hampton, but then there's just a stock load ready to go. And working out at Exos, where you see a lot of these players getting ready for the combine, there were a number of edge rushers that would be working out at the same time we would be working out. It's just a different group. It's just a different breed. It's just unbelievable, the physical attributes that these players have now.
Really impressive bunch here. Coming up next, talk about drafting quarterbacks. Are the Cleveland Browns almost certain to be in on the action? We'll tell you why next here on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Over the weekend, ESPN's Dan Graziano dropped some info on us about what is going down in Cleveland, saying the overwhelming belief of the people I spoke to this week is that the Browns plan to stay put at number 2 in the draft and take one of the top quarterbacks. There's a strong chance Watson has played his final game as a Brown. Cleveland is thinking about what comes next at the position. Now, fellas, Deshaun Watson has 2 years left on his contract at $46 million, fully guaranteed, okay, each year, but obviously he's had his Achilles tendon repaired twice in the past 5 months. He's likely to miss most of, if not all, of the 2025 season. So with this guaranteed money situation, it's not like the Browns really have much of a choice than to go after a young QB, right?
No, it's really about their only option. They're painted into a real big corner. Again, everything about that franchise and all of the issues they're facing now with Myles Garrett wanting a trade all trace back to the fact that they famously botched their quarterback situation. During an iteration of the roster where we saw, Dad, if you even had average quarterback play, that was a playoff caliber roster on offensive line and on defense. And instead they've got this. So it creates a really interesting ripple effect, Dad, now where we sit. But in general, do you agree that it is almost certain they're going to take a quarterback at the top of the draft?
Oh, I think it's absolutely certain they're going to take a quarterback at the top of the draft and start over. The least surprising thing is the statement that Deshaun Watson is done as the Cleveland Browns quarterback. I think that was absolutely known by everybody. He was never going to step foot on that field again as the starting quarterback for the Browns. Once he tore his Achilles again, going to miss next season. And now, so what you do instead of signing a veteran to with any kind of money, you bring in a rookie, so he's on a rookie wage scale. Now, they're probably not the happiest in the world that it isn't last year's rookie quarterback class as opposed to this year's rookie quarterback class. But you have to start over. And the bottom line is you're starting over on a rookie wage scale, which is going to be key for them since they're on the hook for $46 million this year and $46 million next year. This undoubtedly will go down. We talk about the worst top quarterback pick in a draft. This will undoubtedly go down as the worst free agency signing ever, by money that was paid out, all fully guaranteed, and the horrific play of said player. That Cleveland botched this. So, and we talk about if you screw up a quarterback situation, how much it can set you back. I mean, you can almost double or triple that for the Browns, for the money that they put into this, that they guaranteed this and just put themselves in an ungodly hole from the quarterback position. So yeah, their only option is to draft a quarterback. So they are on a rookie wage scale. It was either that or don't draft a quarterback and bring in a really no-name veteran to just bridge it for another year, which you didn't have to pay him a lot because remember, you always had that $46 million on your books for the next 2 years for Deshaun Watson. But yeah, I think without question, they are going to take one of and it'll be, it all seems like whoever is at the top is going to take Cam Ward, so it would be Shedeur Sanders.
Well, so that's where this gets interesting because if it's Tennessee, I would disagree on that. But what this does is this creates a ripple effect. And when you look at this in conjunction with the rest of the quarterback offseason, we just talked to Dane Brugler over at The Athletic, but Jordan Reed, our buddy who came on with us last week over at ESPN, just put out his latest mock draft. And this is the ripple effect, Dad, that started with Matthew Stafford choosing to stay with the Los Angeles Rams. Where now you've got the Giants, who are one of the teams bidding on his services along with the Las Vegas Raiders, back in the quarterback needy market. And you've got this smoke about the Browns absolutely moving on from Deshaun Watson and more than likely drafting a quarterback at the top of the draft. What did Dane Brugler just tell us? Everyone's consensus since November has been, if you're going to draft a guy high, Cam Ward is the guy. Dane just told us he thinks he could see Shedeur Sanders potentially slide in this draft if you're not careful. And so all of that would lead you, if you're the New York Giants, to say, we really need a shot in the arm at this quarterback spot. If we're not going to go and sign Sam Darnold to a big money deal like we just signed Daniel Jones to, then the other option would be to trade up in the draft. And that's what Jordan's got them doing. They are trading up to the number 1 spot with the Tennessee Titans, according to the mock draft from Jordan Reed, and taking Cam Ward. So he's got quarterbacks going 1 and 2 off the board. And Dad, to me, that's exactly what I would want out there if I'm the Tennessee Titans, right? This news about the Browns taking quarterback smells like exactly what I would want out in the universe if I was Tennessee looking to potentially move down, get some assets, and be able to draft the same guy, Abdul Carter, that many people had mocked to me at number 1 overall.
That would be the ultimate for Tennessee. Now, they wouldn't get a quarterback. You know, they have Will Levis, who obviously they're not set on to be their future quarterback. They wouldn't get a quarterback, but to drop 2 spots, I know it's only 2 spots, but the assets that they would pick up, as you mentioned, plus getting Abdul Carter would be just absolute money for them. But again, this is lying season. You're going to hear a lot of stories about who's open for business, who's not open for business. But it does seem like the Giants, which quite honestly, I never saw Stafford to the Giants. Never. We never saw Stafford leaving the Rams. So you wonder how much the Giants actually thought they were going to get Matthew Stafford. So where are we? You know, are the Giants going to try and jump up to number 1 to jump over Cleveland to get the supposed top quarterback in Cam Ward?
A team hasn't traded up from number 3 to number 1 since 1975 when the Falcons did it to draft Steve Bartkowski. So it is something that seems unlikely. And, Dad, to your point, absolutely is lying season. If you were to handicap it right now, Dad, do you think it's more likely that the New York Giants sign Sam Darnold to a long-term deal or trade up to 1 to draft a quarterback in this class?
If I were the Giants, I would sign a veteran. I wouldn't trade up and give up. You need assets. I know you need a quarterback, but listen, you're never sold any year on a rookie quarterback hitting, right? All you can do is grade them and hope because it's a 50-50 shot of first-round quarterbacks, whether they hit or not. But they're a team that needs assets. To give up assets for this quarterback class, I just don't know if I would do it. I don't know if I would do it. So I think I would sign a veteran, work on bringing more assets in, and try and hit on another quarterback on another year, or maybe a veteran quarterback that you bring in. I don't think if I'm the Giants, I'm giving up more assets to move up to get a quarterback that is on the top of the ranking this year, but overall, we're really not sure. And hey, listen, Cam Ward could turn out to be a stud. We have no idea. Like Jaden Daniels did, like C.J. Stroud did. We have no idea. But also, we've seen the other side where rookie quarterbacks struggle, which, by the way, remember, is the norm. Rookie quarterbacks are going to struggle. You're not drafting them for their rookie year.
Unless you're a place with the appropriate environment. And we saw Bo Nix, that conversation we had with Dane, ends up popping his rookie year in large part because he goes to play for Sean Payton, who showed us he's still got the fastball. That thing still hums. Jaden Daniels lands in a revitalized project where Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury come together to create a culture around that team that allows a rookie the chance to go and put those skills on display. So I do think a lot of this is about, I also don't know how conducive the Giants are right now in a year where Brian Daboll's job is going to continue to be talked about. Is that going to be conducive to a young player coming in and having success early versus a guy in Sam Darnold who at this point has seen a lot in his career? Jesse, all of this, though, brings us to an interesting question about the number 1 overall pick that now feels like it's called into question really for the first time this draft season. What do the odds tell us on DK Sportsbook about that?
Yeah, so let's do a little cash it or trash it. Cash it or trash it is presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours. So on the DK Sportsbook right now, the Titans are minus 150 to make the first overall selection. Now, Giants went from plus 240 yesterday to now plus 200, okay? So we're moving up the board a little bit here. So cash it or trash it. What do we think they'll make the first overall selection?
Oof. Dad, right now I'd still be inclined to say the Titans will cash this and end up drafting number 1 overall just because of what we laid out there. This seems like, hey, yeah, this would be pie in the sky for Tennessee when you're the number 1 pick in the draft. You want people picking up the phone to try and pry it out of you. You've sent subtle signals all along about you're looking for a generational talent, and that certainly doesn't apply to the quarterbacks in this draft. So all of that would indicate to me that maybe once we get through a little bit of the turbulence here, we're going to settle in at 30,000 feet with them taking either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter number 1 overall.
I agree. I mean, from now to the draft, it's going to be so much talk and so much lying going on and so much trying each team to position where they want to be. And that's fine. That's the game. I get it. No worries there. But at the end, I think it stays the same. I don't think the Giants give up assets to move up to number 1 for this quarterback class because they need too many assets. And I think the Titans do stay at number 1. So I do think you're right. Going through the turbulence now and the talk and the rumors of this and that and who's performing well. And now we still have the whole round of pro days to go through where, by God, if a quarterback rolls left in shorts and throws a deep ball down the field, he's the next frickin' Joe Montana. So, I mean, we have all that we have to go through still. But at the end of it all, I think we're going to sit with the Titans at number 1.
Yeah, I would agree. And what's interesting to me as we sit here and we've done this exercise a little bit is how we for a long time have conceded that the Titans are absolutely not taking a quarterback at number 1, despite the clear need. Like last year, we watched the combination of Will Levis and Mason Rudolph go out there and do a whole lot of nothing for Brian Callahan in year 1 down with that franchise. The defense actually ends up showing up to the party a lot, and the side of the ball that the head coach majors in couldn't squeeze the best out of either quarterback, and injury played a role, but we had seen a series of reckless turnover undermine Will Levis game in and game out when he was healthy and on the field. And even with that as the backdrop, Dad, to me, has to indicate, at least internally, that this organization is going to give Brian Callahan time because they understand where they currently sit roster-wise.
The Tennessee Titans, gang, were second in total defense. They were second in total defense. They gave up a little bit on the run, but on the pass, they played extremely well. Now, what they didn't do well is they didn't get to the quarterback. They only had 32 sacks, i.e. insert Abdul Carter into that defense, right? So the defense overall statistically did well, but we know they need a quarterback. So that's their choice. It's really a dilemma. I mean, they have the first choice, so they get to choose what side of the ball they go on. Do they go with a quarterback knowing they need help on that side of the ball, or do they go with the Abdul Carters of the world, the guy who can get to the quarterback where they struggled as far as bringing down the quarterback, and go that route? But that's what you get with the number 1 choice. You get the choice to do what you want to do, and that's where you have to that's where your evaluations come in. What's the longer projected star for your team? Is it, and we know the edge rusher is one of the big positions, a quarterback, edge rusher, cornerback, left tackle, one of those premier positions. So which one do you think is going to go further? And that's why you have all those scouts. That's why you have all those coaches. That's why you do all those evaluations to come up with the right pick.
Well, in a division where you're going to have to beat C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence every year, having a guy that gets to the quarterback certainly helps. But it also underscores, again, you need a guy at that position. And we saw, again, I go back to what we saw last year for out in Las Vegas. They go into the season and they say, all right, we're going to miss out on the quarterbacks in this draft class. Unfortunately, the 6 didn't slide down to us, which is an insane thing to say. And now we're going to go into this with just a placeholder at quarterback, and it ends up getting the whole staff fired. Antonio Pierce gets fired after 1 and change years as the head coach, either interim or full-time there for Tennessee, while the organization has to make these calls. Remember, the org chart changed a little bit this offseason because they parted ways with Rand Carthon at GM and now brought someone in after Brian Callahan was installed as a head coach. And so all of this makes me have to believe, Dad, that they're going to give Brian Callahan another year to work this out offensively. You're going to need to see improvement, and they're going to need to see, kind of like we saw from Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland, hey, even when bleep hits the fan, you've got to show us structurally there's going to be enough here to carry the day until we get you the ammunition you need.
It's just going to be, do they draft Abdul Carter and bring in a veteran quarterback, right?
Going to have to.
Have to, right? Can't just hand it to Will Levis. Have to bring in a veteran quarterback, draft Abdul Carter, a generational, hopefully, pass rusher that they're going to think of, and go from there.
All right, the number one pick, something you can bet on over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Will the Tennessee Titans ultimately make the pick, or like Jordan Reed predicts, will a team like the Giants jump up and grab it and a quarterback? We'll ask Jason Fitz when he joins us in hour number 2, next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. In NBA news, LeBron James is now 1 point away from a historical NBA milestone that will likely never be matched in NBA history. So he's on the verge of 50,000 career points between the regular season and playoffs. And he's back in action tonight at home versus the New Orleans Pelicans. The Lakers are 8.5-point favorites. LeBron is plus 400 to score the first point of the game. Break that record. We'll be back with Jason Fitz in hour 2, breaking the record of having him on in hour 2. Just kidding. I don't know. He'll be here in a minute.
Hour number 2 here on Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield. Plenty coming up. A big and brutal night in the NBA on a lot of levels for the Dallas Mavericks. It just keeps getting worse against all odds. We will explain why in just a little bit here. But it's Tuesday. It's 9 o'clock Eastern. And that can only mean one thing. Our friend, the former fiddle player for the band Perry, the current Yahoo Sports football host, Fox Sports radio host, and our friend all around, Jason Fitz, kind enough to join us. What's up, Fitzy? How you doing?
Just living the dream now that I'm hanging out with you guys. I feel good. It feels good this morning. Like, I'm surprised Mike Jr. is still alive after a week in Indy. That's all I'm saying. Like, everybody I talked to that was in Indy this year particularly seems like they're dead inside, and they're going to need like 3 or 4 days just to let their insides recover. So, Mike, I'm just impressed that you're a professional out here today.
I tell you what, I have gotten 2 incredible nights of sleep. I managed to, while staying out late in Indy, not drink all that much in Indy. And so our powers combined, we are, Captain, I feel a little bit better. Honestly, the big win for me was my back holding up in the combine drills that I'm sure you and everybody else saw Fitz on social media that I competed in pretty poorly, and that's saying a lot. But the big win for me as someone that's been dealing with robust back problems for the last couple of months here, getting those out of the way and managing to feel a lot better. That's the absolute dub for me.
Yeah, the dub here, by the way, Senior, you need to do this next year. I think Senior could outdo Junior in the combine at this point. Like, I just want to throw it out there. We should have father-son combine competition.
So that's what you do. You just kind of throw the hand grenade out, and you're not anywhere near the shrapnel. That's not going to happen. Okay, I am not going to run 40 yards hard anymore in my life. Now, not that I could even run it hard. I am not going to do a broad jump because I don't have flexibility in my left knee, and I would come down on that thing and I would stay down on that thing. And also because of my left knee, my vert would be horrifically bad. It would be all around one of the worst. I would be disgusted in myself because I'd be 63 years old by then, and I would even at that age would expect better out of myself, and it would be so bad that there's no way I would put myself through. You know how you as an athlete you're always like, oh, I know I could do it. I know I could still do it. I can't. I can't do it anymore.
Did you just ask Fitz if you said, you know how as an athlete look directly at him and say that?
I actually was looking directly at you, Mike. I was kind of shunning
all right, thank
Fitz
God.
on that one. Yeah.
Secondary option, Senior, I could wear some sort of a device that you can just grab onto, and then you can just chuck me. Throw me for the long jump, toss me up like a cheerleader for the high jump. There we go. Then
here's
my
the
knees
thing,
take all the
Jason.
damage.
I'm sitting here in a sling. I just had my shoulder replaced. Yeah. I'm not throwing you anywhere. I am freaking falling apart, one joint at a time.
That's why hugs.
Yeah,
hugs are the only solution.
You opting all of this as you openly looked at my dad's sling this morning is hilarious. So Dad going to be going at his pro day here. I mercifully made it through the combine. Shout out to Jen Palucci at Chess Fitness in El Segundo, by the way, for making sure my back was able to physically withstand that punishment.
Well done.
And Jason, instead of throwing you, let's talk about the people that were throwing things in and around the combine, and some that weren't. We just had a discussion. A new mock draft from Jordan Reed at ESPN comes out that had the Giants trading up to number 1 overall to take Cam Ward before the Cleveland Browns at 2 took Shedeur Sanders. So quarterbacks going 1 and 2 off the board. You were around that Nashville market for a long time. You know this Tennessee Titans organization. That seems like it would be pie in the sky for them to move down to 3 and still take Abdul Carter. How realistic do you think it is that we see a team like the Giants move capital and go up to number 1 for a quarterback?
I think it's honestly in this situation, I think it's pretty realistic. And the funny thing is, the Titans don't move the needle. We know that. And you get proof of that going up to the NFL draft, because usually if the first overall team has the pick and may want to trade it and there's a quarterback available, it becomes this obsessive conversation point. And that just really hasn't happened this year. I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out what Tennessee wants. Will Levis is not the long-term answer. But if they look at this, and their new GM has said flat out since being hired a couple of times, they will not pass on generational talent just because they need a quarterback. So they've made that abundantly clear. So if I'm the Titans, I'm looking at Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Those are the two best options for me in this year's draft. If I can trade down to 3 or 4 and still ensure that I'm going to get one of those two guys, I would do that every day, all day. Now, the only thing that I question, and Mike, you might have gotten a sense of this in Indy, but the only thing I question is what's really the bounty going to be? Because I don't think Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, either one, captures the sort of trade that even Bryce Young did. So sometimes fans look at it and say, oh, we're going to trade down. We're going to pick up 5 extra draft. I don't think this is that. I think that what we would see paid to move up would be much more marginal.
Then don't do it, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's not the people that are involved in the draft. It's the fact of moving up from 3 to 1 of what that should cost you. That should be a heavy price. And quite honestly, Jason, I don't think the Giants would pay that, because I don't think they have too many holes to fill. And now you're giving up assets to go up to get a quarterback that is not considered a generational quarterback. So I don't think it matters that there's not a generational quarterback available. I think what still matters is if you're moving up to number 1, and I would agree, Tennessee moving to 3 and still getting Abdul Carter would be pie in the sky. But that's the easy part, to sit there and say, oh, I'll move down. Someone's got to move up. Someone's got to give you all the assets to move up to number 1. And it shouldn't matter a damn bit of difference of what type of quarterback is available. It's a fact that you are moving to the number 1 spot, so you have to give up assets.
And part of this, guys, like when you start to think about where the rumors come from, the Titans want more rumors to trade so they can get more trade partners, so there can be more perceived value, so that teams will pay more to move up. Matt Miller at ESPN did a really good article the other day, and I think it's worth checking out for anyone that loves the draft. He ranked the quarterbacks based only on their pre-draft analysis, nothing that they did in the pros, just their pre-draft analysis over the last 5 years. Of important note here, Shedeur was number 20 and Cam Ward was number 18. I think what we have here is a Titans team that knows that, yeah, they got quarterbacks available, but they don't want them. So now they're just trying to drum up interest by making sure everybody knows, no, the Giants might trade up, the Jets might trade up, the Raiders might trade up. Everybody give us more. This is just an agent told me years ago, source who benefits from the rumor and you'll know who's leaking it. These all feel like they're coming from Titans people.
I completely agree with you, Jason. This seems like trying to create a market that just may not exist in this year's draft. Dane Brugler, who was on with us from The Athletic earlier, said he could see this being closer to the Kenny Pickett draft class quarterback-wise than it was anything resembling last year's draft class. Fitz, latest mock for your beloved Raiders has Ashton Genty going 6 overall. How would you feel, and how would Raiders Nation feel if a running back is your top 10 draft pick this year?
Yeah, look, I mean, I love what Senior said earlier about the Giants. They have a ton of holes. So when you have a ton of holes, you go best player available. And I know that everybody tells me, well, what's the point of a running back? Running backs need to be the whipped cream on top of the sundae. You can't make the running back the foundational piece. I hear you. But Mike, what do we know about Pete Carroll? We know that the Seahawks, when he was in charge, had no problem drafting running backs in the first round. We also know that the Seahawks love to trade down. So I think, if anything, the Raiders are a candidate to trade down and take one of the top 2 running backs. Makes sense, as long as they address quarterback at some point in free agency. And that's a big, as long as, like, I genuinely don't know what the Raiders will do if Shedeur is sitting there at 6 and Ashton Jeanty is sitting there at 6, and you need a quarterback, but Ashton's higher on your draft board. Like, that's where things get a little spicy, because we've all heard about Brady's relationship with Shedeur. They've known each other for a long time. Tom seems to love the kid. How much emphasis will he have in the room? Like, I understand, and I will say loudly, while I don't believe that Shedeur Sanders would normally be the 6th pick in the NFL draft, I do believe that Pete Carroll has earned benefit of the doubt in how he handles the quarterback position. So if he takes him, then he sees something. But if you tell me that the Raiders just stand pat and take best player available, does Ashton Jeanty make them a playoff team? No. Does any one player in this year's draft make them a playoff team? No. So I take the Brock Bowers logic all over again, and I just keep making my team drastically better on draft day.
You mentioned the quarterback part of that with Shedeur Sanders as the shiny object. How real did you think it was with Matthew Stafford? Despite all of the Tom Brady and him ski lodge rumors, the offer seemed to be real, reported from the Raiders to the Los Angeles Rams to try and pry him out of there. How far down the road do you think that was?
Look, everybody I've talked to made it very clear that the Raiders made aggressive offers. We've seen the reports between $90 and $100 million, and they felt pretty good about it. They felt pretty good about where they were. But Matt Stafford, at the end of the day, he's going to look around and try and figure out, does he want to move his family? I think more importantly, does Matt Stafford want to go lose a bunch of football games? Because, like, right now, if winning matters at all, the 2 teams he was flirting with, the Giants and the Raiders, the one thing I'd say is that if everything broke right for Matt Stafford at either of those locations, he's at best on the 3rd best team in his division. Like, at best, if things break right. So if you're Matt, you got to look around with your family and say, do I want to move my family? Do I want to move my wife? We love LA. Do I really want to move to then be the 3rd best in my own division for a little bit more money? I think, as much as the Raiders made a very serious offer and were hopeful they could get him, this is also a very real moment where they had to understand what they were up against from a human standpoint.
So listen, the veteran quarterback situation is way more intriguing than Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Way more. So your Raiders need a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz is now in the conversation as well. Where do your Raiders go if they do not draft a quarterback?
I really thought Sam Darnold would be where they made an aggressive offer. Now, I've heard some conflicting things on whether or not they're actually interested. I have one person tell me that they're very interested in Sam, and the next tell me they're not interested at all, which is why they made such an aggressive move for Stafford. So I'm a little surprised to hear that, because outside of that, I don't think there's a great option, guys. Like, I know people want to try and assign Aaron Rodgers to somewhere. Frankly, for my money, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, the best match for me right now is probably the Titans. I can go somewhere where I'm working with a quarterback-friendly head coach. That's fine. But I'm also in a market that's kind of invisible to that stuff, that's not going to mind all of the other noise. It's going to you can be a little bit off the grid down in Nashville. I think that actually the Titans make a lot more sense if they want a bridge gap quarterback than the Raiders do. And maybe I'm just doing what I just talked about. Maybe I'm just manifesting this so he doesn't end up on my favorite team. I'll admit that. But the rest of the options you talked about, like Daniel Jones, the noise is real. The Colts are very interested in Daniel Jones. So I think Daniel Jones is going to end up a Colt. You start going down this list, it gets pretty paltry pretty quickly. So I think that's what gets it. Like, I'm unfortunately starting to just settle into the fact that Aiden O'Connell might just by default end up starting again for the Raiders next year because they can't find anybody. Whew.
Do you think Pete Carroll is worth that much of an improvement, though, on that? Like, well, having someone that, unlike Antonio Pierce, knows how to do this, has done it at a high level already, and at least org-wise around the building. Like, I'm curious what you've already heard the impact for Pete Carroll will be behind the scenes and how he's been received in there and how much they expect, kind of like the Harbaugh effect in Los Angeles, to be something on its own that's worth a certain amount of bump.
I think there's an interesting moment happening right now because Pete Carroll and John Spytek, the new GM, have been really honest about the fact that they're breaking down the roster. I also think it's fair to just acknowledge that the roster is trying to figure out how they feel about Pete and John. Like, there's a moment, and I've talked to Max Crosby fairly regularly, and I think you could see it in that press conference. I think it's pretty fair to say, like, Max is at a spot in his life where, he's all in, but he's also seen a lot of chaos. So, like, why is this going to be different? I think there's this interesting moment happening right now within the Raiders organization where Pete's getting another roster, and the roster is trying to figure out how to get to know their third coach in the last couple of years. Like, it becomes overwhelming at some point. The one thing I'll say, and Junior, you know this too, and Senior, you know this from watching Chip Kelly so much. Chip wants to run the ball. So, I mean, as much as we talk about Chip and his crazy offenses and the great things he can do to scheme guys, Chip wants to run the ball, which brings me all the way back to Ashton Genty. If you know your quarterback is going to suck, then you better do something to mitigate that disaster from day one. I think that there's a little bit here of like, hey, do we have what we need? I think the Raiders are going to be aggressive on offensive line and free agency to try and pull a guard from somewhere that they believe can start. And I think they're going to look at running backs in part because they know they can't get the quarterback they need. So it makes it easier for them. They are going to run the football.
I have been telling my NFL friends who don't watch much college football, the Chip Kelly that you are getting back in the NFL this go around is not the Chip Kelly that left last time around here. A lot added to the tool bag, some very interesting stuff that I am excited to see with the pieces in that offense. Coming up next, though, excited to see one of the most dynamic pieces in the draft and how he's been received post-combine. Let's talk Travis Hunter here on Gojo and Golic. If the combine is about sorting through the excess to find the best of all these prospects here, this one was an easy bit of gold to mine from the pile in Indianapolis. Travis Hunter, the two-way sensation that most people expect to either be in contention with the number one overall pick, if not an easy top 5 pick for somebody on both sides of the football. He made that abundantly clear in Indianapolis that he wanted to continue to work on both sides of the football and felt he was capable of doing so at the next level, which invites a lot of comparisons. One particular cross-sport comparison that's had a lot of legs even since the college football season was Travis Hunter and Shohei Ohtani. And Dad, Jason, he got asked about what would be harder, doing what he does as a wide receiver and a cornerback in the NFL, or doing what Shohei Ohtani has done in pitch and hit in Major League Baseball. And this was the answer Travis Hunter gave at the podium.
Probably me, what I do in football, because it's a lot on your body. You know, Tony, he's a great player, but you got to do a lot in football.
So, wide receiver / cornerback, more difficult than pitcher / hitter. Jason, how do you feel about this statement?
100 times out of 100. Like, there's just so much. The snap count in and of itself. I remember years ago when they did a study on the snap of the football, and they talked about how every time a football is snapped, you interior linemen are basically absorbing a car crash. So you're talking about, when you look at whatever he averaged, 100 and I think it was 112 snaps a game last year, between being hit and getting hit, like nobody's ever actually, as much as Shohei Ohtani is hitting a baseball, nobody's hitting him while he does it. Just the process of getting hit over and over and over again in a football game. I realize corner and wide receiver don't get hit the same way linemen do, but that matters. Look, at the end of the day, a good buddy of mine that was a Major League Baseball player for years always talked about in the 7th inning, they brought him a sandwich so he could, refuel for the end of the game. If you can eat a sandwich in the dugout in the middle of a game, that's not as hard as a football game. I'm just saying. It's just not as much on you.
So I will say physically football is much harder. Listen, there's zero doubt about that. That's not even under discussion as far as football to baseball. But from a technique standpoint, technique's the wrong word. I think the hardest thing to do in all of sports is hit a baseball. I think the hardest thing to do in all of sports is hit a baseball. And Shohei Ohtani hits a baseball as well as anybody does. And then to go in, he's not just an average pitcher, he's a damn good pitcher. So to go on that side of the ball as well and be a pitcher as well as one of the great hitters, I think is more difficult from a talent standpoint. But from a physicality standpoint, there's no doubt football is. And listen, Shedeur isn't going to play every play, but still, to go both ways is asking a lot in the most physical sport there is out there. So from the physical side, I agree with Travis. From the talent side of what it takes to do that job, I think Shohei Ohtani it's definitely tougher.
I'll tell you the tiebreaker for me in this, because I agree with everything you guys have said so far. Dad, I am in total agreement. Someone asked me the other day if you got, an entire Major League Baseball season, to go out there and try and get one hit, could you? And I said, no, I would go 0 for the entire season. I would not get better. None of the stuff that people would try and apply in that scenario is true, because it is the most technical skill in all of sports. So I agree with you on that. The difference for me, physicality, yes, that goes to football overwhelmingly. The difference is the interconnectedness. Even Travis Hunter playing a position in quarterback, which, by the way, corner and offensive line, the two most unnatural skill sets on a football field. Incredibly technical, very well learned, even for an athlete of Travis's caliber. You still, at some points, have to rely on and communicate with other people. Pitcher versus batter, that's a one-on-one matchup. That can isolate you from everyone else on the field at that point in time. So in addition to having to go out there and know his responsibility and fit in and do that job, Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball, between relying on a quarterback on one side but potentially having to communicate with the secondary on the other, I think the interconnectedness of football separates that as a challenge that differs so much from just a batter versus hitter on either side of that matchup.
Look, I and there's also some carryover between wide receiver and corner that makes sense. Can I push back on the hardest thing in sports just for 1 second? I respect that hitting a baseball is on the list. To me, the toughest thing in all of professional sports to do is to score a goal in an NHL game. Because if you think about it, shooting percentages for most players in the NHL, like I think the average is it's under 10%. I think it's 8 or 9%. Is best case scenario, and save percentages for goalies conversely is about 91%. So just the concept of what it takes to score a goal against a goalie in the NHL, I think it's actually tougher than hitting a baseball.
Again, to Mike's point, there's a lot more involved. Unless it's a shootout, it's not a one-on-one scenario.
So that's what I was going to ask. If it was a shootout goal, Dad, how would you feel about that? Easier or harder than hitting a baseball?
Scoring a goal or hitting a baseball in a shootout scenario, I would still say hitting a baseball. I would absolutely still say hitting a baseball. I get how difficult it is to score in hockey. I definitely think that's one of the hardest things to do in a shootout scenario, as opposed to when they're mucking it up in front of the net and you can deflect a puck and a goalie never sees it. There's a lot more involved than just the one-on-one of pitcher and batter.
I'll just say this. If you can isolate it down, again, making it so it's just the transaction like it is with pitcher and batter, where you don't have defense going against you as the hitter in that scenario, and I don't want defense because if you had defense in the NHL and the fear of getting hit by one of those guys, it absolutely takes it to the other side. But just from the pure standpoint of, I have something going away from me as opposed to the projectile coming at me. That's the thing in baseball. If you've got a pitch that's all of a sudden breaking right at me and then dips out of there, I'm on the deck. Forget even taking a cut at it. I'm on my ass or falling backwards the other way. At the very least, I control the projectile release when it comes to the NHL. So at Gojo and Golic on Twitter, harder thing in sports, hitting a baseball or scoring a goal in an NHL game. Jason has now added that to the pile, and I think a worthwhile submission there as we legislate those in honor of Travis Hunter, who, he's one of those guys, that level of athlete. I believe Travis Hunter can do most anything he put his mind to, and that could certainly be one of them. Maybe switching gears here, Travis Hunter, we should put his talents towards trying to fix college football, because it really seems like we are moving towards an interesting Fisher point. And the year seems to be 2030, Jason, because right now, yesterday, we got reports that Clemson and FSU are reportedly set to vote coming up today on an agreement that would ultimately result in the settlement of the ongoing lawsuits they've had with the ACC and a new revenue distribution strategy that would solidify conference membership until about 2030. So the board of directors from the ACC, from Clemson, and from Florida State all have to come together and agree on this. But essentially what you get on the other side is a new revenue distribution model that would be putting the emphasis on television eyeballs here. It would be called the brand initiative, where the teams that got the most ratings at the end of every year would then get the most money. And between that and then the competitive initiatives they've had in the last couple of years, where teams that make it further and get into the college football playoff will get more of that pie, the top teams in the ACC would stand to see a bump of about $30 million per year, while the bottom-dwelling teams would stand to lose about $7 million. And we can pause there, Jason, and just get your thoughts on that, because this seems to be yet another move in college football that drives a wedge between the haves and have-nots, but the have-nots are in no position to say no to, because they all saw how it's worked out for Oregon State and for Washington State, and nobody wants to be that. Above all else, that seems to be the driver here, is seeing what happened to the teams that get left behind if all of a sudden you get a little bit over your skis and what you ask from the big brands in your conference.
You can never walk into a negotiation scared. And to me, every single team that is not one of the bigger brands in the ACC walked into these negotiations scared. A buddy of mine years ago said, when you get into legal matters, you don't have to be right. You just have to be able to afford bigger and better attorneys. So now look at this ACC lawsuit and just ask yourself, okay, which of these schools can afford bigger and better attorneys? We start down that list. And then if those schools decide to get their bigger and better attorneys to find a way out somehow, some way of the ACC, despite the Bill of Rights, if they get themselves out, what happens to everybody else? To me, it feels like everybody else came into this saying, hey, losing part of something is better than losing all of everything. And that's the situation they're in. So they negotiate in fear. From step one, they take less money. And you're right. Long term, this was important for the Clemsons of the world that want to continue to try and figure out how to compete in the new landscape. But also long term, the trickle down effect on this will be important to everybody not named Clemson, because if you can't figure out a way to get eyeballs, you're going to get less money. And once you start getting less money, how do you compete? So this is putting a Band-Aid on something that needs surgery, and it's going to buy them some time. But negotiation and fear never wins.
No leverage. No leverage to the lower teams in conferences. They have no leverage. And more about the split, it's based off a 5-year rolling average of TV ratings, and basically 40% will be distributed evenly amongst the 14 members. 60% of the brand initiative is distributed based on TV ratings. To Mike's point, eyeballs. So the lower teams have zero leverage. They have this has gone from the Power Five to we've lost the Pac-12, to the Power Four, to conference versus conference, Big Ten and SEC leading the way over the ACC and the Big 12, to now infighting within conferences. This is all about grabbing what you can grab for yourself, right? It's going away from conference versus conference to now infighting within the conference, of conferences now looking at basically Florida State and Clemson and saying, wait a minute, we're in a conference here, but we're the leaders of this conference. We're the ones that have the eyeballs in this conference. We should be getting a heavier hand here. And basically they sued their way and now will settle their way to that. And this is just going to continue to happen. The haves will have more and the have-nots will have less and like it.
I mean, but then let's add one team, because you said Florida State and you said Clemson. Let's not get it twisted. On a rolling 5-year average, North Carolina is going to be right. They got a coach that everybody's going to want to watch. They got a coach that people are going to flock to, right? Like Belichick may or may not win games. Who cares? Like he's got them in the offseason, Hard Knocks. People are going to watch that.
Here's the problem.
We just got the news, by the way. Unfortunately, it seems like those negotiations fell through, and Bill Belichick in North Carolina will not be a part of offseason Hard Knocks. So I just saw that report on Twitter. Sad that we're not going to get that.
And real quick, Jason, this is a 5-year rolling average. Bill Belichick will not be at North Carolina for 5 years.
No, you're right. But he's going to do some damage in the next 3 or 4. Let me tell you, they're like, if you're SMU, who's sitting here saying, wait, we're supposed to be the cream of the crop, like nationally, like when we get to November, are more people going to care about SMU, or are they going to put North Carolina in every hot TV window? Because I feel like the college football power is going to put North Carolina in every big window on every big network for every game.
Fun fact, the highest rated team in the ACC last year, Georgia Tech. The big game against Florida State to start the season, and then the multi-overtime game against Georgia late in the year. Hence why this is going to be a 5-year rolling average, because sometimes it's just going to be the way the schedule breaks. The real rub of this, though, because this is unsurprising. Other conferences, to your point, Jason, SMU, the new teams in the ACC, not taking as much revenue as a part of their TV deal for the first 8 years of that. Even Oregon and Washington, two comparatively big brands, not taking as much of the pie in the Big Ten right now. The real rub of this is the other change that would come as a part of this deal is that they want to remove or lessen the financial penalties for leaving the conference starting in 2030. Why 2030, you ask? Because the television deals for the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the college football playoff all come up in 2030. For those of us that have been sitting and whispering and wondering about the Super League, 2030 is the year to keep an eye on for when everything would break down. Because to Dad's point, now that the conferences have turned and used the parlance of our time and said to the bottom dwellers, they not like us, they're going to look at the people that are and say, why aren't we all doing this together? And the breakaway point at least seems to be primed in 2030. And it's the reminder, I saw it resurface yesterday. If you want to learn more about what college football is and what it's going to become, read the book, The Club. It's about the formation of the English Premier League, and it will tell you everything about two sports with very similar structures, where this is all going to go. And we saw years ago, remember during the pandemic, they tried that Super League nonsense over there, and the difference and the reason why it will happen over here and it didn't is because soccer fans are much crazier even than football fans, and they will actually burn down your building as opposed to fans that will just chant in the stands here and do crazy stuff in America.
Telling me to read a book is like, telling me to read a book is like giving me homework, and I'm not going to do that.
Well, nowadays you can just say you read it, but you listen to it. Apparently kids count that when they're like, no, I read a book last week. I listened to it on my phone. I don't think that counts. I think you should have to read it.
Listen to Jason Fitz over at Yahoo Sports. The same as reading a book. Thanks, Fitzy.
Oh, thanks, guys.
All right, I had no idea what can of worms I was opening up for this show just by merely suggesting that someone read a book, God forbid. And again, The Club by Joshua Robinson and Jonathan Clegg is the best sports book I have ever read. And if you are someone that does enjoy reading, go ahead and give it a read or a listen. And this is what just happened during the break. The explosive debate of if listening to a book on tape counts as having read it or not. I apparently this has been tearing the DraftKings office in Boston apart for a while. Dad, as someone that has done neither of these things for a long time, I'd imagine, do you count listening to a book on tape as reading a book?
No, not at all. If you listen to a book on an audio book, which is fine. I mean, it's a cool way to digest something. You listened to a book. You did not read a book. You can, again, get all the information from reading a book or listening to a book. I don't know how different it's going to be, but you cannot then say that you read a book. You can't. You listened to a book.
Yeah, I don't know what we're debating about this, because you could be illiterate and listen to a book. So no, it's not the same thing as reading. My 3-year-old has this little device called a Yoto where you put a little card in and it reads a story to you. So she's listening to the stories, but she's not reading them because she can't read.
Right. Exactly.
All right, so I do think from the skill acquisition standpoint, that's important. Being able to read objectively good, and I don't know where we are yet in the teardown of the American education system that's going to erode that, but I promise being able to read a good thing. That being said, it sounds like, and so what I'm gathering here, because my whole point was what you guys brought up, is if you are able to retain the information, I have no problem with you saying, yes, I listened to this book, because in my mind, as long as you know how to read and that's not something that you've just completely forsaken in the name of listening to books, then I'm cool with that. But you should just say, yeah, I listened to this book, and there shouldn't be a stigma about it. It sounds like, do you guys look down on people that do the book on tape thing? Because that seems to be the subtext of this.
No, I don't look down on people, but I would look down on you if you told me you read the book and then I find out that you lied and you listened to it. So everybody I know, when we talk about books, if you're talking about a certain book, someone might be like, oh, I read that. And someone's like, yeah, I listened to that one on tape. It was great. You consumed it. That's fine. But you can't lie and say you read it.
So if you read a book, say you have to write a book report, and you read a book or you listen to a book and you write a book report. Can you write a fair book report both ways? Sure. But the one thing about reading is you can go back, and if you maybe didn't understand something, read it. I don't know. And I don't listen to many audiobooks. Do people go back and listen? Do you go back? They obviously can. Listen, this is out of my stratosphere, because I don't really listen to books and I don't really read books, okay? But I know it's very easy to flip a couple of pages back and go over something, but I would imagine it's pretty easy to hit reverse on an audiobook and do the same thing. To Jesse's point, if you can be literate in writing a said book report, both reading and listening, that's fine. But if you listen to a book, you can't say you read the book.
So this is the highfalutin version. Like, if you're reading an audio, or if you're listening to an audiobook or reading a book, you're already doing better than most in the year of our Lord 2025. Yes. The real thing we got to whittle this down to, and the real crux of what happens in this, and the real argument I think we should be having, is what my sister does. It's the people that now say they read an article when really all they did was watch a TikTok on a particular subject. That's the thing that's going to slowly unravel us as a society.
Yeah.
I guess to a question would be, and again, I don't know the answer to this, retention. Retention from reading a book or retention from listening to a book? Is there a difference?
I think that might be a different thing for different people, just the same way that, Dad, I'm sure when you were a player, you played with plenty of guys who, some guys learn best by going out and doing it on the practice field. Some guys learn best by seeing it up on the whiteboard. Some guys learn best by having to write it down in their notebook a million times that way. I'd imagine that's a different strokes for different folks kind of thing.
But that's like, I have a lot of friends who use the Kindle and they love it. I like a physical book. So I like to turn the pages and read the actual physical book. So again, it's like I think I consume it better that way. Something about having it, smell, like I just like it.
But reading a Kindle is the same as reading a book.
It is still the same.
That is the same. You are reading. You are reading the book.
Sniffing it, yeah.
Jesse, I'm with you. I love the smell of Stu Gotz's personal record book, a physical book that you can hold in your hands that I have also written a chapter for here. StuGotzBook.com. Go ahead and check that one out. That smells great and is great use of your time and money here as we put this at Gojo and Golic on Twitter. Does listening to an audiobook count? That's all we need. Does it count?
No, it counts.
You can interpret that however you want, but that's the poll. Does it count?
No, it counts. The poll is, does it count as reading a book?
All right, does it count as reading a book here? I will take that edit and we can throw that up and get the answer to that. In the meantime, Jesse, we need to talk about the poor Dallas Mavericks because their life just keeps going from bad to worse. And last night, unfortunately, adding Kyrie Irving to an already terrible pile of luck and decisions in that building.
Makes you wonder if some people in the Mavs front office maybe can't read. But we found out on Monday that they're raising season tickets just weeks after the Luka Doncic trade that we're now all looking at as like a generational fumble. So he gets traded to the Lakers. Now they're saying season tickets are going to go up by an average of 8.61% next season. The increase is due to ongoing investments in the team and fan engagement. Well, I fear that those, data analytics aren't analyticing. I don't know what's going on, but this is not good.
It's one of those things that, Dad, you could justify to me in a boardroom and in a vacuum. Hey, our season tickets holders are still saving X amount of money relative to going and buying this in the secondary market. And these are all the things you get. And this is the cost of inflation. And all things, God, we've seen this across the world of sports. Plenty of college football programs have upped their season ticket prices and their ticket prices in general with money going towards NIL with the players. But at least I'm getting a return. At least a lot of those schools had the wherewithal to do that when they were having good seasons. For the Dallas Mavericks to not adjust a bit of their messaging, considering the fact that they just traded away Luka Doncic, and then, oh, by the way, this isn't lumped into that, but my God, last night Kyrie Irving hyperextends his knee in the Mavs game, trots himself out to the free throw line, very reminiscent of Kobe Bryant, and we're hoping the result on the other side in terms of the severity of injury isn't as steep as that, but boy, the visual was just heartbreaking to see. Kyrie Irving, the last man standing on a roster that's already down so many of its best players. Now add that onto the top of the pile, and then, Dad, throw this headline out. And the Dallas Mavericks are dealing with an, in most ways, self-inflicted PR fumble of a lifetime lately.
It almost can't get worse. I don't know how Nico Harrison can show his face publicly and not just get booed every time. He thinks he did the right thing for the next 3 or 4 years, not paying Luka the $345 million and not having a guy on the roster, even though he's been a 5-time All-NBA and a superstar at 25, that he's not in shape as a player and doesn't fit the mold of this team. So you basically trade for Anthony Davis and are trading for the next 2 to 3 years tops for this team to do anything, including this year, and AD goes out almost immediately. You have, obviously, Daniel Gafford has been out, Derek Lively has been out, PJ Washington has been out, and then Kyrie Irving gets hurt last night. And to go with the headline of the ticket price raise, it almost seems like it can't happen this bad to the Dallas Mavericks, who are just barely hanging on in any kind of even play-in to the playoffs.
It does make me wonder, and I think it might have been the guys at the Le Batard show that brought this up a while back. It's been a long time since we've had a sports move that felt worthy of a curse. But I do wonder if Nico Harrison and the Dallas Mavericks actually messed this up so bad that the franchise is now cursed. Because that's sort of what it feels like we're wandering into. So I would just say, again, to use our book analogy, maybe bookmark this page right now. Maybe bookmark this moment in history and see if we have actually, for the first time in what feels like decades, again, echo Joe Golic on Twitter, what's the last sports curse that we've had thrown out? Because it feels like the Dallas Mavericks could be in line. We'll get to this, that, and the third and finish off the show next on Gojo and Golic. All right, let's wrap up the show the way we always do. It is this, that, and the third. It is 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. As always, please download, subscribe, rate, and review us. We need it. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel especially. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we're going up there. We also need your help there. Thank you to our great guest that stopped by today, Dane Brugler, the NFL draft expert over at The Athletic, author of The Beast that comes out every spring. If you want to get smarter about the draft, Dane is your guy. Getting smarter might sometimes happen by accident with Jason Fitz. He joined us in hour number 2. Great host and analyst over at Yahoo Sports. If you missed any of those, check them out wherever you get our podcast or right here on the YouTube channel as soon as we get done. Let's start off this with happy trails. Jimmy Johnson, the Pro Football Hall of Famer and longtime Fox Sports NFL analyst, announced his retirement yesterday on The Herd with Colin Cowherd after 31 years and two stints on Fox that totaled about 25 years of total work. Dad, Jimmy Johnson finally calling it a day here. It seems appropriate after we got to finally celebrate him in the Cowboys Ring of Honor very publicly that this would be the next step in him getting to go and fully enjoy retirement now.
I didn't even realize he's 81 years old, and the dude loves the Florida Keys. It's where he lives. He fishes. He would do shows actually from there. You know, when COVID was going on, he would do it from there, and he just has a great life down there. And listen, this was one of the great coaches when Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys. This was right during my time in Philadelphia. So the Buddy Ryan, Jimmy Johnson rivalry was hot and heavy. It didn't last a lot of years, certainly, but it was a short-lived rivalry. It was, and then between the Eagles and the Cowboys, obviously being in the same division. What he did, how he built that team from a 1-15 team in '89 when his first year there, when Jerry Jones bought the team, to then back-to-back titles in '92 and '93. Was incredible. And then that team won in '96, mostly his players that Barry Switzer coached. And then he went into TV and then went back to be the head coach and GM of the Miami Dolphins. Didn't go so well there. But what he did, Mike, he worked the draft one year for ESPN when I was at ESPN, and I was working the draft as well. And the draft meetings we had were ungodly long because everybody felt like they needed to talk. But when some people talked, they were like the old E.F. Hutton commercial, everybody listened. And Jimmy Johnson was one of those guys. He would lay out his grading structure on trades during the draft on a numbering system. And by the way, pulled off one of the greatest trades of all time, the Herschel Walker deal that brought so much back to the Dallas Cowboys. It was one of the great educations I had ever had of the ability and the smarts of a coach talking about a grading system to trading and trade value. And you could see why he built championship teams. And the unfortunately, it took him way too long to get in the Cowboys Ring of Honor. That was on Jerry Jones, his jealousy that Jimmy Johnson was getting all the credit of which he deserved for the championships. Luckily, that went by the wayside, and Jimmy Johnson is where he belongs. But what an incredible career! And oh, by the way, won a national championship at the U with an incredible team at Miami.
Yeah, to have that kind of resume and then become such a fixture as a broadcaster is a rarity. A lot of the guys that do that don't end up wanting or needing to put in the work on this side in order to be great in that way. And Jimmy Johnson certainly did. He's been a fixture on Fox my entire lifetime in terms of watching football and associating him with Sundays on Fox. I know that group loves the hell out of him, and he'll be dearly missed on that set. And for a lot of people, it's going to feel weird, the same way it is when quarterbacks leave the game. When a broadcaster that you've known that long leaves, certainly going to leave a void. So congratulations to Jimmy Johnson on a hell of a career, both on the field and in the broadcast booth as well. Jesse, let's get to that and talk about airplane scorpions instead.
Yeah, so a 40-year-old woman was brought to the hospital on Sunday after she was stung by a scorpion at Boston Logan International Airport. So she was getting her bags in the baggage claim area in Terminal E, which is the international terminal. So she's getting her bags. She feels a little prick, something a little painful. Turns out a scorpion stung her and she had to go to the hospital. And it notes in the article, it was unclear how the scorpion ended up there. Well, I'll tell you how. It was just hanging on someone's bag, all right? Someone, packed their bag up, something slipped in, and then boom, it's here in Boston, Massachusetts, where that's the last thing we need to worry about. It's winter, everybody's cold, now we got scorpions running loose. Just add it to the hellhole that is airports.
Oh, I mean, listen, there's no doubt the scorpion wasn't from there. I mean, scorpions are out where I live. We see them out here. So it didn't say anywhere, or I didn't see anywhere where she came from. Obviously, if it was in her bag, she came from somewhere where scorpions were. And scorpions aren't necessarily that much danger to adults. It can be to a lot older people or to really young kids. That's where can be the most danger to scorpions. But that still had to be somewhat of a shock to be in Boston and say you got stung by a scorpion. I guarantee you that scorpion isn't going to last long in Boston in the wintertime, and I'm sure is dead as a doornail right now. But yeah, that had to be a little bit of a stunner.
Literally.
I mean, we're ignoring the obvious corollary here, right? These circumstances so unusual. New superhero has to be dropping soon. Like, Boston's going to have a new crime fighter available in the streets with some sort of scorpion-like abilities here. Usually it feels like the scorpion animorphs kind of fall into the villain category, so it'll be interesting to see if she uses her powers for good or evil coming up after this. But either way, to Dad's point, scorpion stings really just desert bee stings, more or less, in terms of their effect on people, unless in a bee's case you're allergic, and in the scorpion's case if you're a baby or an old person. But still, infinitely scarier to be stung by, right? Like, if you're going to find a bee on your bag or a freaking scorpion, that's going to knock you loose in a different way than the fuzzy bee can.
They are scary looking.
Yeah, they are. They're not the best looking things in the world. And when you find them in your house, that's not a great thing at all. It's a little bit of a fearful thing.
Yeah, going nose blind to scorpions and desert creatures. The desert that creates an environment so hazardous that the things that survive in it should terrify you, because what they have to do to stay alive is ungodly. Finding them in your toilet and at the foot of your bed the way you do when you live out in Arizona sort of makes you numb to them, so much so that gas stations put them inside of gelatin and serve them as a treat that people can eat. I kid you not. So now that we've fully discussed it, Jesse, let's get to the third for a more wholesome headline to finish off the day.
Okay, yeah. So Serena Williams is joining the ownership group for the Toronto Tempo. So the Tempo are the 15th team to join the WNBA. They're going to tip off their first season in 2026. Their expansion draft going to be held after the 2025 season. So Toronto says Williams going to play a role in designing jerseys, creating merchandise collabs with the team. Pretty cool to see. She just keeps expanding her sports team ownership stakes. We love to see it.
Yeah, Dad, we've talked about this a lot. The star athletes of my era, the generation that I grew up watching, came into so much money that now broadcasting, going to coach teams is beneath them, and so many of the richest and best of them have now turned to ownership. And Serena kind of underscored women's sports is an incredible ownership and growth opportunity. We've sort of talked about that ad nauseum on the show, and the team, while primarily owned by Kilmer Sports Ventures and chaired by Larry Tenenbaum, is going to bring her in as a consultant for a lot of different things, in addition to her having the piece of the pie on a league that just continues to show upward trajectory. So more money in the bank for her, but certainly an all-time great in the world of sports, period, that any franchise would want to have around.
And she doesn't have her toe just dipped in that franchise. She already owns a stake in the Miami Dolphins, Angel City FC, and the Los Angeles Golf Club. You see her at these TGL events all the time that are shown on ESPN, the Indoor Golf League. And you see her there all the time, and she's part owner of the Los Angeles Golf Club team on that. So as you mentioned, your era of athletes, Mike, are more into ownership than into coaching or GMing. It's the top end athletes who are making the most money. They are into buying, part ownership of soccer teams, of football teams, of basketball teams like A-Rod is doing. That's where and listen, why wouldn't you? You see the value of professional sports teams just skyrocketing, and these athletes have the money to do it.
We'll know the WNBA has really made it when Serena Williams is caught potentially tampering in a mountain town with a major WNBA free agent, and a bunch of WNBA insiders get into a Starbucks fight about it before their combine. If you enjoy more news and stories like that, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.